Our HOA board member stood under her umbrella, watching my pregnant wife beg in the freezing rain. My baby had stopped moving. My wife was turning blue from cold. But the expired parking sticker mattered more to her than 2 lives dying right in front of her eyes. She had no idea who I really was. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The rain was coming down in sheets when my phone rang. I was sitting in my new office at Riverside Gardens HOA, signing the final paperwork for my position as community director. The job had started just 3 hours ago. I had been so excited about this position, about making a difference in our community. I had spent weeks preparing for this role, reviewing policies, meeting with the outgoing director, learning about resident concerns. I wanted to be the kind of leader who actually cared about people, not just rules and regulations. The office was small but comfortable, with windows overlooking the main entrance gate. I could see the rain hammering against the glass, creating rivers down the window panes. Thunder rumbled in the distance. It was the kind of storm that made you grateful to be inside, warm and dry. "Marcus, please help me." Sarah's voice was shaking. "I'm locked outside the gate. Mrs. Henderson won't let me in. I'm getting soaked and the baby, something doesn't feel right." My heart stopped. Sarah was 8 months pregnant with our first child. We had been so careful with her health. Every doctor's appointment attended. Every precaution taken. Her pregnancy had been textbook perfect until now. The doctor had encouraged her to take short walks for exercise, to keep her circulation healthy and prepare her body for labor. She had only gone to the small park 2 blocks away, a walk she had done dozens of times before. "What do you mean she won't let you in? Where are you exactly?" My voice was already rising with panic. I could hear the rain pounding through the phone, so loud it almost drowned out Sarah's words. "At the main entrance. My key card isn't working. Mrs. Henderson is standing right here with her umbrella, but she says I can't come in until we renew our vehicle registration sticker. Marcus, I'm so cold. The baby stopped kicking. I'm scared." Her voice cracked on that last word, and I could hear she was crying. Sarah never cried easily. She was the strong one in our relationship, the one who stayed calm in emergencies. Hearing her break down like this terrified me more than anything. I grabbed my keys and ran. The paperwork scattered across my desk. My coffee mug tipped over, spilling across the contracts I had just signed. I didn't care. None of it mattered. My wife was in danger. My unborn daughter was in danger. And some HOA board member was standing there watching it happen. The hallways of the HOA office building blurred past me. I nearly knocked over a maintenance worker in my rush to the parking lot. The rain hit me like a wall when I burst through the doors, instantly soaking through my shirt. I fumbled with my car keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. The drive took 6 minutes. 6 minutes that felt like 6 hours. I could hear Sarah crying through the phone, which I had wedged between my shoulder and ear so I could keep both hands on the wheel. I could hear the rain pounding relentlessly. And I could hear Mrs. Henderson's sharp voice in the background, cold and unyielding. "Rules are rules, young lady. Your vehicle sticker expired yesterday. No valid sticker means no community access. It's really quite simple." When I pulled up to the gate, the scene made my blood turn to ice. Sarah was leaning against the brick column, completely drenched. Her maternity dress stuck to her swollen belly, the fabric clinging to every curve of her pregnant body. Her hair was plastered to her face in dark, wet strands. She was shivering so hard her whole body was shaking, violent tremors that made her look fragile and broken. Her lips had a blue tint that made my stomach drop. She had her arms wrapped around her belly, as if trying to protect our baby from the cold and rain. Her eyes were red from crying, and when she saw me, relief and fear mixed on her face. Rain poured down on her without mercy, each drop seeming to hit her with physical force. The wind whipped her wet hair across her face. Puddles had formed around her feet, soaking through her shoes. She looked like she had been standing there for hours, though it had probably only been 15 minutes. 15 minutes that could have killed her. 15 minutes that could have killed our baby. And 3 feet away stood Mrs. Henderson. Completely dry under a large golf umbrella, the kind with corporate logos that rich people get for free at charity tournaments. Her arms were crossed over her chest in a posture of absolute judgment. Her face showed no concern, no worry, no basic human empathy. She looked annoyed, if anything. Annoyed that this pregnant woman had the audacity to inconvenience her with a medical emergency. Her perfectly styled gray hair hadn't been touched by a single raindrop. Her expensive raincoat was pristine. She stood there like a queen observing a peasant, secure in her little bubble of power and dryness while a pregnant woman suffered 3 feet away. I jumped out of my car and ran to Sarah. I wrapped my jacket around her trembling shoulders, but it was already soaked through within seconds. The rain was that fierce, that unrelenting. "I've got you, baby. I've got you." I pulled her close, trying to transfer my body heat to her frozen body. Her skin felt like ice against mine. She was so cold that touching her sent a shock through my system. This wasn't just cold from rain. This was hypothermia cold. This was dangerous cold. "The baby," she whispered against my chest, her voice so weak I could barely hear it over the storm. "She's not moving anymore, Marcus. I can't feel her. I've been trying to feel her kick for the last 10 minutes. Nothing. There's nothing." Her hands pressed against her belly, searching desperately for any sign of life from our daughter. Terror gripped my chest like a vice. Our baby girl, the little life we had been preparing for, dreaming about, loving already for 8 months. The nursery we had painted together, soft yellow walls with white clouds. The tiny clothes we had washed and folded. The name we had chosen after weeks of discussion. Hope. We were going to name her Hope. And now she might be dying inside Sarah's belly while this woman stood there with her umbrella and her rules. I turned to face Mrs. Henderson with rage I didn't know I possessed. A fury so pure and intense that my vision seemed to sharpen, everything crystallizing into brutal clarity. "What the hell is wrong with you? She's 8 months pregnant. She could die out here." Mrs. Henderson lifted her chin. "Young man, I don't appreciate your tone. The HOA bylaws are very clear. Section 4.2 states that all vehicles must display current registration stickers. Your wife's vehicle has an expired sticker. Until that violation is corrected, she cannot access community property. It's really not my fault that you people can't follow simple rules. She's not a vehicle. She's a human being carrying our baby. The rules apply equally to all residents. I've been on this board for 12 years and I won't start making exceptions now. That would be unfair to everyone else who follows the rules properly." Sarah's knees buckled. I caught her before she hit the ground. "We're going to the hospital. Right now." I helped her toward my car. "Your vehicle also has an expired sticker," Mrs. Henderson called out. "I'm documenting both violations. And your aggressive behavior toward a board member. You can expect formal notices in the mail." I stopped and turned back to face her. This was the moment I had been waiting to avoid until tomorrow's official board meeting. But she had forced my hand. "Mrs. Henderson, let me introduce myself properly. I'm Marcus Johnson. I started today as the new community director of Riverside Gardens HOA. Which means I'm your supervisor. And as of this moment, you're suspended from the board pending a full investigation into your conduct." The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened and closed. No words came out. "You just endangered the life of a pregnant woman and her unborn child over a parking sticker. I suggest you move out of my way before I call the police and have you charged with reckless endangerment." I didn't wait for her response. I got Sarah into the car and drove straight to the emergency room. The hospital waiting room was freezing. Or maybe that was just Sarah. She couldn't stop shaking even wrapped in 3 warm blankets the nurses had brought. Her teeth were chattering so hard I worried she might chip them. A nurse rushed over the moment she saw Sarah's condition, immediately recognizing the signs of severe hypothermia. She didn't ask questions. She didn't make us wait. She just grabbed a wheelchair and rushed Sarah back to an exam room, shouting orders to other nurses as they moved. I held Sarah's hand as we waited for the doctor, watching the color slowly return to her lips. Pink replacing that terrifying blue. But she was still shaking, still terrified. I could see it in her eyes. The fear that we had lost our baby. The fear that those 15 minutes in the rain had killed the little life inside her. When the doctor came in, she was a kind-faced woman in her 50s with gentle eyes. But her expression was serious as she squeezed warming gel onto the ultrasound wand. "Let's see what we've got here," she said softly, moving the wand across Sarah's belly. Her face was serious, concentrated, giving nothing away. The machine beeped. The doctor moved the wand slowly, methodically, checking every angle. Her face remained neutral, professional. Sarah gripped my hand so hard I thought she might break my fingers. I didn't care. She could break every bone in my hand if it meant our baby was okay. The silence in that room was the worst sound I've ever heard. Each second that passed without hearing anything felt like an hour. I found myself holding my breath, afraid to move, afraid to hope, afraid to think about what it would mean if that screen stayed silent. "Please, God. Please let our baby be okay." Then we heard it. Faint at first, then stronger. Thump thump. Thump thump. Thump thump. "There she is," the doctor smiled. "Your baby girl has a strong heartbeat. She's doing just fine." Sarah burst into tears. I pressed my forehead against hers and cried with her. However, the doctor's voice turned serious. "Sarah, your body temperature dropped to dangerous levels. You have early signs of hypothermia. Your blood pressure is extremely elevated. You're showing symptoms of preeclampsia, which can be life-threatening for both you and the baby. What happened today could have triggered premature labor or worse." She paused and looked at both of us. "You need complete bed rest for the remainder of your pregnancy. Any additional stress could be catastrophic. I'm admitting you overnight for observation. We need to monitor both of you closely." As they moved Sarah to a hospital room, the reality crashed over me like another wave of that cold rain. My wife could have died today. My daughter could have died today. Because of an expired parking sticker. Because someone decided that a piece of adhesive paper on a car windshield was more important than 2 human lives. Because Mrs. Henderson valued rules more than human life. I stepped into the hallway and made phone calls. First to Sarah's mother, who answered on the first ring. I heard her gasp when I told her what happened, heard her voice break when I described finding Sarah in the rain. She said she was getting in her car immediately, that she'd be at the hospital within the hour. Then to my new supervisor at the HOA management company. He listened in stunned silence as I described the incident, then used language I won't repeat here to describe what he thought of Mrs. Henderson's actions. He gave me full authority to suspend her immediately and launch a complete investigation. Finally, to our lawyer. A college friend who specialized in personal injury cases. When I finished telling him the story, there was a long pause on the line. "Marcus," he said carefully, "what she did could have killed Sarah and your baby. That's not just negligence. That's reckless endangerment. Possibly criminal charges. Definitely a civil case. Document everything. Every medical report. Every witness. Every communication. We're going to make sure she faces consequences for this." That night, I sat beside Sarah's hospital bed watching the monitors. Each beep showed our baby's heartbeat. Strong and steady. A miracle. But I couldn't stop thinking about how close we had come. How those beeps could have stopped. How that heartbeat could have faded away in the rain and cold while Mrs. Henderson stood with her umbrella and her clipboard and her precious rules. I watched Sarah sleep, her hand resting on her belly even in sleep, instinctively protecting our daughter. Her face was peaceful now, the fear and pain temporarily erased by exhaustion and medication. But I knew she would carry this trauma. I knew this day would haunt her. How do you forget standing in freezing rain, 8 months pregnant, begging for help while someone watches and does nothing? My phone buzzed constantly. Word had spread through Riverside Gardens about what happened. Dozens of residents messaged me with support. And with their own stories about Mrs. Henderson. Each message made me angrier. Each story revealed another layer of cruelty. The Patel family told me Mrs. Henderson had their car towed while Mr. Patel was inside having a heart attack. The car was parked 3 inches over the line. They had to call an Uber to get to the hospital because their car was already on a tow truck. Mr. Patel almost died because the ambulance was delayed and they couldn't transport him themselves. The Martinez family shared how she reported them to Child Protective Services for neglect, because their 10-year-old played in their own fenced backyard without direct adult supervision. They had to endure a full CPS investigation, strangers coming into their home, questioning their parenting, terrifying their children. All because Mrs. Henderson decided that a child playing safely in their own yard was somehow endangerment. Elderly Mr. Chen described a $500 fine because his grandson's bicycle was visible from the street. The boy was visiting for the weekend. The bicycle was on their front porch, not even on the lawn. But it violated some obscure rule about recreational equipment visibility. A $500 fine for a bicycle on a porch. A young mother named Jennifer told me about being reported for hanging laundry outside to dry. She was trying to save money on electricity. But apparently, clotheslines were unsightly and violated community standards. She received a violation notice with threats of daily fines until the clothesline was removed. An elderly veteran named Tom shared that Mrs. Henderson had reported him for flying his American flag improperly. The flag was standard size, properly mounted, and lit at night according to flag code. But she claimed it was too large and too visible. She wanted him to take down the flag he had earned the right to fly through 20 years of military service. Story after story. Cruelty after cruelty. All justified by rules and community standards. But what she did to Sarah was different. She had watched my pregnant wife suffer in the freezing rain and felt nothing. She had endangered 2 lives and showed no remorse. Sarah came home the next day with strict bed rest orders. Her mother moved in to help. The doctors were serious about the bed rest. No stairs. No standing for more than a few minutes at a time. No stress. Complete rest until the baby came. Every day, I watched Sarah lie there with her hand on her belly, still traumatized by what happened. She had nightmares. She would wake up crying, saying she was back in the rain, that she couldn't get inside, that the baby was dying. "What if you hadn't answered your phone?" she whispered one night, staring at the ceiling in the darkness. "What if you had been in a meeting? What if you hadn't gotten there in time? What if I had just collapsed there and no one helped me?" She would have just stood there and watched, wouldn't she? She would have watched me die and then written up a violation report for my body being on HOA property. The what-ifs haunted both of us. But they haunted Sarah worse. She was the one who had stood there in the rain. She was the one who had felt our baby stop moving. She was the one who had begged for help and been denied. I could be angry. She had to be terrified. Meanwhile, I launched a formal investigation into Mrs. Henderson. What I discovered made me even angrier. I spent long hours going through 12 years of HOA records. Complaint files. Financial statements. Email chains. Board meeting minutes. The picture that emerged was damning. She had systematically harassed families for years. Not just occasional enforcement of rules, but targeted, relentless harassment of anyone she didn't like. Families who had complained about her. Families who had different political views. Families who were different races or religions. Families whose children were too loud or whose cars were too old or whose lawns weren't quite green enough. She had financial conflicts of interest, giving HOA contracts to her nephew's landscaping company at inflated prices. 3 years of contracts, each won thousands of dollars more than competing bids. The HOA had overpaid by an estimated $40,000, money that had gone straight into her family's pocket. She falsified violation reports against people she didn't like. I found cases where she had claimed to see violations that security cameras proved never happened. Grass too long that was actually regulation height. Cars parked wrong that were within proper boundaries. Noise complaints filed at times when the accused residents weren't even home. She even created fake rules that didn't exist in the actual bylaws. She had told residents they couldn't paint their doors certain colors, couldn't plant certain flowers, couldn't have guests park overnight. None of these rules existed in writing. She had just made them up and enforced them as if they were law. The emergency board meeting happened 1 week after the incident. The conference room was packed. Mrs. Henderson showed up with a lawyer, confident as ever. Residents stood up one by one to share their experiences. Voices shook with anger. Some people cried describing years of harassment. Mrs. Henderson sat stone-faced through it all. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and looked directly at her. Mrs. Henderson, you left my 8 months pregnant wife outside in a freezing rainstorm because of an expired parking sticker. You watched her beg for help. You saw her suffering. And you did nothing. My wife's blood pressure reached life-threatening levels. Our baby could have died. My wife could have died. And you stood there with your umbrella and quoted rules. I paused. But this wasn't about rules. This was about power. You've turned this community into your personal kingdom where you make people suffer. I've reviewed 12 years of your conduct. The harassment. The retaliation. The financial improprieties. The abuse of power. I'm recommending your immediate removal from the board, a full audit of all contracts you influenced, and civil action for endangerment. You can't do this. Mrs. Henderson finally spoke. I've given 12 years to this community. I've maintained property values. These people should be thanking me. Thanking you. Mrs. Roberts stood up, her voice shaking. You had my disabled son's van towed because it was unsightly. He's in a wheelchair. That van is how he gets to medical appointments. We missed 3 appointments because of you. A young father stood. You reported my family to CPS because you saw my 5-year-old riding her bike in our cul-de-sac. My wife cried for weeks thinking they'd take our kids. The case was dismissed as frivolous. You traumatized my family for no reason. Story after story. Lives disrupted. Families hurt. All because Mrs. Henderson had power and no compassion. The board voted unanimously to remove her. Her lawyer threatened legal action, but I had documentation of everything. As Mrs. Henderson stormed out, she turned back. You'll all regret this, she hissed. The only thing I regret, I replied calmly, is that you were allowed to hurt people for so long. The community began healing. We rewrote the HOA rules with resident input. We focused on genuine safety instead of petty restrictions. We created an appeals process. We made the board accountable. But Sarah struggled. The trauma ran deep. Every time it rained, she would shake. She had nightmares about being locked outside, unable to reach our baby. 3 weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday morning, Sarah's water broke. The hospital again. But this time no rain. No locked gates. No Mrs. Henderson. Just us and our daughter. Labor was long and difficult. Sarah's blood pressure spiked multiple times. But she pushed through with incredible courage. At 3:47 a.m., our daughter entered the world with a loud, strong cry. "She's perfect," the nurse said, placing her on Sarah's chest. "Absolutely perfect. We named her Hope. Because that's what she represented. Hope that survived the storm. Hope that endured cruelty. Hope for a better world." Mrs. Henderson never apologized. She moved out 3 months later, still bitter. I heard she tried joining another HOA board. I made sure they knew her history. She was rejected. 1 year later, Riverside Gardens was transformed. Children played freely. Families helped each other without fear. The community felt like an actual community. Sarah and I were at the pool one afternoon, watching Hope splash in the baby pool. She was almost 1 now, healthy and happy. Mr. Chen approached us slowly with his walker. "Are you Marcus Johnson?" "Yes, sir. I'm Robert Chen. You helped my family when Mrs. Henderson harassed us about my grandson's bicycle." He looked at Hope. "This is the little one who survived the storm." "This is Hope," Sarah said. Mr. Chen gently touched Hope's hand. "You're a miracle, little girl." After he left, Sarah and I sat quietly. "Do you still think about that day?" I asked. "Every time it rains," Sarah admitted. "But then I look at Hope and remember we survived. We're here. We're together. That's what matters." The lawsuit took 18 months. Mrs. Henderson fought viciously. But the evidence was overwhelming. Security footage showing her under the umbrella watching Sarah suffer. The doctor's testimony. Dozens of resident testimonies. The judge was a woman who had raised 3 children. When she heard everything, her face hardened. "Mrs. Henderson, you stood 3 feet from a pregnant woman in medical distress and did nothing. You prioritized expired paperwork over human life. Your actions were deliberately cruel. I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiffs on all counts." 2 years after that terrible day, Sarah and I watched Hope chase butterflies in our garden. She was 2.5, full of energy and joy. "I never told you this," Sarah said, "but when I was locked outside, I talked to her. I put my hand on my belly and told her to hold on, that her daddy was coming, that we'd be okay. And I swear I felt her move. Just once. Like she heard me. Tears filled my eyes. You're the strongest person I know." "No. I'm just a mother who fought for her baby. Any mother would do the same. But not every mother should have to fight like that. That's what made Mrs. Henderson's actions unforgivable." Hope ran up with a dandelion. "For Mommy." Sarah took it with exaggerated delight. "Thank you, baby girl. It's beautiful." I watched them together, both smiling, both healthy, both here. I thought about all the moments we almost lost. First steps. First words. Birthdays. Bedtime stories. All almost stolen by someone who cared more about stickers than human lives. 5 years after the incident, Hope started kindergarten. She was bright and curious and kind. One day she came home upset. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Sarah asked. "Tommy was mean to Emma at recess. He said she can't play because she talks different." "But Emma is nice, Mommy. She just talks with her hands." "Emma was deaf and used sign language." "What did you do?" "I told Tommy that different is okay. And I asked Emma to teach me sign language." "Is that good?" Sarah hugged her tight. "That's very good, Hope. You stood up for your friend. That's exactly what you should do." Later, Sarah found me with tears in her eyes. She gets it. She understands what matters. Kindness. Standing up for people. Not judging differences. "She learned from you," I said. "From us," Sarah corrected. "From our experience." From choosing to be better than the cruelty we faced. That was Mrs. Henderson's ultimate defeat. She tried to break us, but we became stronger. We became kinder. We raised a daughter who stands up for others. 7 years later, I stood at the community center for our annual meeting. The room was packed with families. Children played. Neighbors laughed together. 7 years ago, I began, this community was different. We were so focused on rules that we forgot why communities exist. We exist to support each other. To help each other. To be there when things get hard. I looked at Sarah with hope on her lap. 7 years ago, someone in power made a choice. She chose rules over humanity. She chose cruelty over compassion. And she nearly destroyed my family. But she also taught us what kind of community we didn't want to be. The room was silent. Since then, we've built something better. A place where people matter more than property values. Where children play freely. Where neighbors help each other without fear. Where compassion guides us, not just regulations. The room erupted in applause. After the meeting, a new resident approached me. I'm Robert Winters. Just moved here last month. I've lived in 6 HOA communities over 20 years. I've never seen anything like this. People are actually happy here. What's your secret? I thought about the rain and Sarah's voice on the phone and Hope's heartbeat on the ultrasound. The secret is remembering that rules exist to serve people. Not the other way around. The secret is choosing kindness even when it's not required. The secret is standing up against cruelty even when it's dressed as regulations. The secret is caring more about people than property values. Sounds simple. It is simple. But not easy. It means making unpopular choices. Standing up to bullies who hide behind rules. Remembering that behind every violation notice is a real person with real struggles. That night, in bed with Sarah beside me and Hope sleeping peacefully down the hall, I thought about how far we'd come. What are you thinking? Sarah asked sleepily. Just grateful. For you. For hope. For second chances. For surviving the storm. Sarah snuggled closer. We didn't just survive, Marcus. We used it to build something better. That's the real victory. Not surviving, but thriving despite it all. She was right. Mrs. Henderson tried to break us. Instead, she revealed who we were. Fighters. Survivors. People who chose love over hate, kindness over cruelty, compassion over rules. The rain still falls sometimes. Storms still come. But they don't scare us anymore. We learned something Mrs. Henderson never did. Rules can be important, but people are essential. Property values matter, but human lives matter more. Order is useful, but compassion is necessary. And sometimes, the most radical act is simply choosing kindness in a world that rewards cruelty. Mrs. Henderson spent 12 years building walls. We spent 7 building bridges. Hope is 9 now. She's on student council, advocating for kindness policies and anti-bullying programs. She volunteers at the community center teaching sign language. She stands up for students who are different or struggling. She's everything we hoped for and more. On rainy days, I still think about that terrible afternoon. But not with fear anymore. With gratitude. Because it taught us what really matters. It showed us who we wanted to be and who we never wanted to become. Mrs. Henderson thought she was teaching us about following rules. Instead, she taught us that some things are more important. Like human life. Like compassion. Like doing right even when regulations say otherwise. That's a lesson Hope will carry forever. And hopefully teach her children someday. And the cycle of kindness will continue, long after that rainy day fades. Because in the end, love always outlasts cruelty. Compassion always defeats indifference. And community built on caring will always be stronger than community built on rules. That's our story. That's our truth. That's our victory. And no rain can ever wash that away. But there's more to this story. Something I learned in the years that followed. Something about how trauma can transform into purpose, how pain can become power, how the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best changes we make. 3 years after Hope turned 9, when she was 12 years old, something remarkable happened. She came home from school one day with a proposal. She had written a complete plan for a community kindness initiative. She wanted to create a youth council that would review HOA policies and provide input on how rules affected families with children. She wanted to establish a neighborhood support system where residents could help each other during emergencies. She wanted to create a community fund to help families facing unexpected hardships. "Dad," she said, spreading her papers across the dining room table, "I've been learning about what happened when I was a baby. Mom told me the whole story. And I've been thinking. What if we make sure nothing like that ever happens to anyone else? Not just here, but everywhere." I looked at Sarah, who had tears streaming down her face. Our daughter, who had almost died before she was born, was now trying to save others from similar cruelty. "That's a wonderful idea, Hope," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. Hope's initiative grew beyond anything we imagined. She presented her plan at a regional HOA conference. Her speech about her own story, about being the baby who almost died because of an expired sticker, moved hundreds of people. She talked about her mother standing in the rain, about the trauma that still affected their family years later, about the importance of putting humanity before regulations. Within a year, 17 other HOA communities had adopted versions of her kindness policies. Within 3 years, it became a statewide movement. Hope was invited to speak at conferences, to consult with HOA boards, to help rewrite community guidelines across the country. She called her organization Umbrella, because everyone deserves protection from the storm, regardless of their parking sticker status. Sarah and I watched our daughter turn our worst nightmare into a mission that helped thousands of families. She became the voice for every person who had ever been bullied by HOA board members. She became the advocate for common sense and compassion in community governance. On Hope's 16th birthday, we received a letter. It was from Mrs. Henderson. After all these years, she wrote to us again. The letter was different this time. It wasn't just an apology. It was a confession. She wrote about her own childhood, about growing up in a home where love was conditional on following rules perfectly. About how she had internalized that cruelty and projected it onto others for decades. About how she had spent years in therapy trying to understand why she had been so cold, so heartless. She wrote about seeing Hope on television, speaking at a conference about the Umbrella Initiative. She wrote about breaking down crying when she realized that the baby she had almost killed had grown up to dedicate her life to preventing others from experiencing similar cruelty. "I don't deserve forgiveness," she wrote. "But I want you to know that your daughter has done more good in her young life than I did in all my years on that board. She took the worst thing I ever did and transformed it into something beautiful. That doesn't erase my actions. But it gives me hope that some good can come from even the darkest moments." We showed the letter to Hope. She read it silently, her expression thoughtful. "Do you want to respond to her?" I asked. Hope was quiet for a long moment. "I think I do. Not for her sake. But for mine. I want her to know that I forgive her. Not because what she did was okay. But because holding on to anger only hurts me. And I want to use my energy for good, not for hate." My daughter, at 16, had more wisdom than most people acquire in a lifetime. That night, Sarah and I stood in Hope's doorway watching her sleep, just like we had done when she was a baby. But now she was nearly grown, this remarkable young woman who had taken trauma and turned it into transformation. "We almost lost her," Sarah whispered. "That day in the rain, we almost lost everything." "But we didn't," I said, pulling Sarah close. And look what she became. Look what we all became. Because that's the real end of our story. Not just that we survived. Not just that justice was served. Not just that Mrs. Henderson faced consequences. But that we took the absolute worst moment of our lives and used it to make the world better. HOPE's Umbrella Initiative has now helped change policies in over 200 communities across 15 states. Thousands of families have been protected from the kind of cruelty we experienced. Countless HOA board members have been trained in compassion-based community governance. And it all started with a pregnant woman standing in the rain, a heartless woman with an umbrella, and a baby who refused to stop fighting. Mrs. Henderson tried to teach us about rules. Instead, she taught us about resilience. She tried to break us with cruelty. Instead, she forged us into advocates for change. She tried to make us victims. Instead, she made us warriors for kindness. That's the power of choosing love over hate. That's the victory of choosing compassion over cruelty. That's the triumph of choosing to build rather than destroy. Our story began with rain and fear and almost ended with tragedy. But it transformed into purpose and passion and change that rippled out far beyond our small community. And every time it rains now, I don't think about that terrible day with dread. I think about it with pride. Because we survived the storm. We grew stronger from it. And we made sure that storm would protect others instead of harm them. That's our legacy. That's HOPE's legacy. That's the real victory over Mrs. Henderson and everything she represented. The rain still falls. But now, we all share umbrellas. We all protect each other. We all remember that people matter more than policies, that lives matter more than rules, that compassion matters more than control. And that's a lesson worth learning, even if it came at the highest price.